Friends, times of vulnerability, times of trouble in this sinful world have the opportunity to break us. Because that is when anger and frustration become manifest. Do you see how quickly God flipped that situation for this lady? From I trusted you to yeah, I trust you. Friends, God does that exact same thing for you, taking our sinful doubts and placing forgiveness and love back into our hearts and trust. And you want to know how he does that? Every single time that you read the word and you think of the image of a cross and Jesus dying upon it, here is what you see. The Holy Spirit convinces your heart in that sacrifice that you have a God who understands every single trouble in this life. You have a God who understands what it's like to hurt, what it's like to be sick, what it's like to lose income, and what it's like to die. And yet he beat it. Every single time that you go to the Word, the Holy Spirit convinces your heart in the story of the resurrection of Jesus that you have God who faced down the greatest difficulty, took away sin, went into the tomb, and came out of it so that one day you will too, so that the troubles that you face in this life are purely temporary, as real as they are. This is how God does this for you. When you read stories like this young man at Nain who was raised from the tomb, and you read a story about this widow and her son coming back from the grave, you know that God cared about that broken, doubting lady. And you start to think, well, if God cared about her and forgave her and loved her, well, then he's certainly going to love me, and he's certainly going to take care of me in the exact same ways, be it now or be it in eternity, he is going to. Friends, back to that I trusted you moment for the widow. Imagine for a second that before the death happened, imagine for a moment that Elijah grabbed her by the face like this, real gently, and looked into her eyes and said, I know that what's going to happen is terrible, but this is what's going to happen. God's going to raise your son to life. It's all going to be okay. How would she have reacted to this situation if she knew that resurrection was going to take place? Oh, a lot differently, yes? She would have prayed. She would have prayed and she would have said, oh, this hurts, I'm grieving, this is terrible, it breaks me. But I know that God is going to provide. The knowledge of the resurrection and forgiveness during a time of trouble makes it so that she could have stared at her situation a lot differently. Friends, I think you and I have that knowledge of the resurrection. You and I have the knowledge. We know that God provides heaven for us. We know it. And so that changes how we are going to view times of trouble in this life, pastor included. Let me tell you a story. Just recently, a few months back, as you know, some of you know, I had a call to go preach in Amarillo, Texas at a new mission start. And I'm really glad I stayed. I love it here with you all, but I got to tell you a story. Part of me having that call is that I got to talk to people who have done things like that before. And so I was speaking to this pastor that was in my class who started a new mission church from scratch. And when I talked to that pastor, I asked him, I said, what was that like to start a church from scratch without any people other than your wife and your kid? How did that go? And he kind of chuckled. And he said to me, well, it made me feel really naked on a Sunday morning. It made me feel really vulnerable on a Sunday morning because I would show up and I literally had no idea on Easter Sunday if anyone would be there other than my wife. But you know what, Alan? He said in that moment, that trouble and that stress and that vulnerability caused me to rely on the only person that could take care of it. The only person that could cause people to want to learn about Jesus. And that's the Holy Spirit and God. And so that moment of vulnerability caused him to look up to God who could take care of all of his worries and all of his problems. See, friends, here's what this lesson teaches us. It teaches us how to stare at trouble when we feel vulnerable, when we feel hurt, when we're like, I trusted you, why did this happen? It teaches us to look at those moments, not just as stressor, but as an opportunity to lay our stress, our doubt, and our sin at the feet of the cross to the only person that can take care of our problems. Friends, this lesson, here's what it teaches you. It teaches you to be the strongest person at your loved one's funeral. While everybody else falls apart around you, you hurt and you cry, but you still stare at that box and you say, that thing ain't the end, and I know that my loved one is going to come out. This lesson teaches you and me how to look at pain and trouble and suffering and say, I have a God who takes care of me. Just like this woman, because of the grace of God in Jesus Christ and his death and resurrection, we have been changed, friends. We have been changed from I trusted you to I trust you, God, in everything. Friends, I don't know what your troubles are. Maybe I know some of them. I don't know what they all are, but whatever they are, trust him. Trust your God. Look to him in times of trouble because he's going to bring you through it. He's going to bring you through it in this life and all the way to heaven.